This is the 2014 AP Language and Composition FRQ for the rhetorical analysis. And for this one, again, we're given approximately 40 minutes. And we're given always a little bit of context before the excerpt that we have to read and annotate. So here we see, in the following letter, Abigail Adams, 1744 through 1818, writes to her son, John Quincy Adams, who is traveling abroad with his father, John Adams, a United States diplomat and later the country's second president. Read the letter carefully. Then, in a well-developed essay, analyze the rhetorical strategies Adams uses to advise her son. Support your analysis with specific references to the text. So we want to look at what our actual prompt is. We want to analyze the strategies Adams uses to advise her son. We are going to have to cloak that in a thesis statement before we get to the actual writing of the essay. So we're going to keep this in the back of our mind. What is she using to advise her son? Okay. So the date is 12 January of 1780, and it starts off, "My dear son, I hope you have had no occasion, either from enemies or the dangers of the sea, to repent your second voyage to France. If I had thought your reluctance arose from proper deliberation, or that you were capable of judging what was most for your own benefit, I should not have urged you to accompany your father and brother when you appeared so averse to the voyage." So this is interesting, this term proper deliberation. And capable of judgment. This sort of tells us how Abigail Adams views her son, maybe someone who's not capable of proper deliberation. "You, however, readily submitted to my advice, and I hope will never have occasion yourself, nor give me reason to lament it. Your knowledge of the language must give you greater advantages now than you could possibly have reaped whilst ignorant of it. And as you increase in years, you will find your understanding opening and daily improving. Some author that I have met with compares a judicious traveler to a river that increases its stream the further it flows from its source, or to certain springs which, running through rich veins of minerals, improve their qualities as they pass along." So very clearly we have some metaphor here. "It will be expected of you, my son, that as you are favored with superior advantages under the instructive eye of a tender parent, your improvement should bear some proportion to your advantages. Nothing is wanting with you but attention, diligence, and steady application. Nature has not been deficient." So this is saying that he needs more attention, more diligence, and more application of that with which he's been gifted. Certainly this idea here that he's been favored with superior advantages would be important, okay? This implies a comparison to those less fortunate. And we don't mean socioeconomically less fortunate necessarily, but simply someone without the superior advantages that he has. "These are times in which a genius would wish to live. It is not in the still calm of life or the repose of a pacific station that great characters are formed. Would Cicero have shown so distinguished an orator if he had not been roused, kindled, and inflamed by the tyranny of Catiline, Verus, and Mark Antony? The habits of a vigorous mind are formed in contending with difficulty." So we have a few things happening here. Here we have a bit of aphorism. Should be like a saying, something that you would accept as a given truth. And then also reference here to Cicero, Catiline, Verus, Mark Antony. So some historical evidence / allusion to their tyranny, okay? "All history will convince you of this, and that wisdom and penetration are the fruit of experience, not the lessons of retirement and leisure." Okay, so here we have some contrast, some juxtaposition. And this is to reinforce the idea that he needs wisdom and penetration, the action, the thinking, the doing, as opposed to just sitting around. "Great necessities call out great virtues." So interesting rhetorical technique here with great and great. When a mind is raised and animated by scenes that engage the heart, then those qualities which would otherwise lie dormant wake into life and form the character of the hero and the statesman. War, tyranny, and desolation are the scourges of the Almighty and ought no doubt to be deprecated. Yet it is your lot, my son, to be an eyewitness of these calamities in your own native land, and at the same time to owe your existence among a people who have made a glorious defense of their invaded liberties, and who, aided by a generous and powerful ally with the blessings of heaven, will transmit this inheritance to ages yet unborn. My goodness, there is so much happening in this section of the letter, and it's up to you which things you care to identify, to take your time to do with your annotations. Tons of pathos, quite obviously. Lots of diction, war, tyranny, desolation, the scourges, calamities in your own native land, and some parallelism to be an eyewitness and to owe your existence. So I'm going to put my little parallel lines there. Again, generous and powerful ally, transmit this inheritance to ages yet unborn. What a powerful phrase right there. Okay. All right. Nor ought it to be one of the least of your incitements towards exerting every power and faculty of your mind that you have a parent who has taken so large an active share in this contest and discharged the trust reposed in him with so much satisfaction as to be honored with the important embassy which at present calls him abroad. So in other words, carry on. This appeals to the idea that you should carry on your family's legacy, and specifically here we're going to write father's legacy. And certainly his father's been quite successful. In our final paragraph of the letter, the strict and inviolable regard you have ever paid to truth gives me pleasing hopes that you will not swerve from her dictates, but add justice, fortitude, and every manly virtue which can adorn a good citizen. Do honor to your country and render your parents supremely happy, particularly your ever affectionate mother. And it's signed AA. Okay, so this is interesting. Truth here is personified as her. So truth is personified, and then we have manly virtue. So interesting choice here. This is going to appeal to pride or a sense of ego. So I've got some different ideas written down here. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the annotations we have. Certainly we have metaphor, other comparison, juxtaposition. I might want to work with the umbrella term of analogy if I want to look at that. We've got historical evidence and allusion, aphorism, tons of pathos happening here, the appeal to legacy and pride, personification, so figurative language. There's really a lot happening in this letter. Our job is to determine what rhetorical strategies Abigail Adams uses to advise her son. You're not wanting to list all of these. That doesn't prove anything. What you want to do is identify a few of those strategies and explain how they would be convincing to her son, or how they would be used to help advise her son. I'm hopeful that as you read this, you get this idea of a parent who's maybe interfering a little bit. Maybe the advice is not necessarily welcomed, but that's the role of the parent. So she's certainly trying to tiptoe around telling her son what to do, but at the same time, she's telling him what to do. She's offering that instruction. So let's come up with a working thesis that we could use to better organize our ideas. And I'm just going to jot down through her use of, and this is where I have to determine what I'd like to write about. I'd like to write about analogy and then pathos. Through her use of analogy and pathos, Abigail Adams is able to offer her son direction and advice and then however you want to end it so that he'll embrace responsibility, or, you know, as the American Revolution has concluded, as America begins, whatever you want to put. It was, of course, written in 1780. You saw that date in the opening of the letter. I'm going to write, is able to offer son direction and advice to help motivate his embrace of responsibility. Not as clear as I want it to be, certainly wordier than what I'm going to want when I refine it, but it tells me as I'm working with my outline, okay, you're going to look at analogy and you're going to look at pathos as the devices she used to help steer her son in a direction that she desires, whether it's a direction where he's going to embrace opportunity or responsibility, whether she's offering direction. Some of you might read it as encouragement. She's certainly trying to shape his choices as he proceeds, okay? So now I'm using the 4-paragraph model here. In my first body paragraph number 1, I'm going to talk about analogy. And I'm using that umbrella term analogy because I think I want to talk about metaphor, some comparison, maybe even juxtaposition here. And what I want to look at here, in the opening 3rd paragraph, we have some comparison of superior advantages. So comparison of one born in privilege as having the superior advantage. And I'm going to write down here that the implication is it's his responsibility. Because he's born with certain privileges and he has these superior advantages, that he has knowledge of a language, he's able to go abroad to France, that he needs to capitalize. That would be the word, capitalize on the opportunity, the privilege, the advantage that you have. So she sort of appeals to his reasoning there that, hey, don't waste it, don't squander what you've been given, okay? So that might be one of the things that I first write about with analogy. I might also look at the metaphor that is also written into the start of the 3rd paragraph of her letter when she talks about the judicious traveler to a river. And of course, if I'm quoting, I'm going to spell traveler the British way with 2 L's. Traveler / river. And the idea that as water runs, it improves its quality, so should John Quincy Adams, which of course is her son, all right? And this is to encourage him, if we're trying to relate this to her advice, again, that idea of wasting, don't waste your travels. As you travel and you learn from different cultures, different politics, different people, you should use that to shape your sense of self so that you have these qualities that you can then use to your advantage back in this nascent nation of America. One other thing that I might want to add, and this would be a great place to name drop. Now, you've heard me say that a few times, and if you go back to the very first instructional video, you will, for the rhetorical analysis, you will hear me reminding you that name dropping simply means that, and I'll switch colors for a moment, your body paragraph is going to be about analogy or comparison, contrast, right? When you are writing about these comparisons, this comparison, maybe you drop in a rhetorical device, but you don't digress from the focus of your analogy paragraph, but rather you use that terminology in order to show another analogy. So the name drop I would have here would be either historical evidence, or if you'd prefer to use allusion. And you can say that Abigail Adams alludes to the adversity that Cicero experienced in order to become a great leader. This comparison or implied comparison between Cicero and her son, do you see how I've name dropped this term allude, but I'm saying that she makes this allusion in order to imply a comparison between her son and Cicero, and to demonstrate for her son that just as Cicero encountered the tyranny of Catiline, Varus, and Mark Antony, so too will John Quincy Adams be met with adversity on his path to growth and development. Okay, so hopefully you heard how I did that and why I did that. So these are just some ideas for a body paragraph on analogy. Now, my next paragraph is going to be another umbrella term, body paragraph number 2, pathos. And some of the ideas that we have here for pathos, obviously the word choice, a little bit of the imagery. There's quite a bit of imagery, especially when we get to the 4th body paragraph. It's very strong, but it's paired. So I'm just going to write imagery plus diction. 4th paragraph. But it's a timed essay, and this could get rather bulky if I wanted to spend a lot of time here. One of the things you heard me say as we went through came actually in that last paragraph where we had some personification. So I'm going to talk about the personification of truth as she, right? There's that diction. We choose to use that positive word. Actually elevates it to a maternal parallel, so that Abigail Adams and Hope are linked. That's followed immediately in line 60 by this every manly virtue. And to use that term manly there, that would adorn a good citizen, et cetera, that's going to appeal to John Quincy Adams' pride, frankly, his ego. She's writing to a young man. She's certainly using the words carefully and deliberately, okay? Okay, certainly you might even want to use a little bit of pathos in your counter argument, and maybe the counter argument here. It might be that she's a bit too condescending. And here in the counter argument, I'm going to talk about her tone and even her diction as well. Because it could be offensive. It might seem too heavy-handed, too adamant. It might feel like he's still tied to his mother's apron strings. He's clearly a young man at this point, and it sounds like mommy is still telling him what to do. So that could actually alienate or cause him to reject her advice. Certainly causes a divide. But at the same time, the rebuttal would be she balances her tone and diction with words like hope, honor, and even ends with the affectionate mother. That's the conclusion of her letter, to remind him that this letter is not meant to upset him. It's not meant to insult him. It's simply a parent who is concerned about her son's development and is hopeful that he will make good decisions. Okay. So there we have our skeletal outline, and we could go ahead and go into the body, making sure that we understand as we cover our examples, we demonstrate the impact it would have on her intended audience, and her intended audience is her son. All right. Good luck and enjoy writing the essay.